it's Easter weekend, Pastor Jeff. You just spoke a great message on the resurrection of Jesus. And I actually want to start off with, I don't know if, obviously you're familiar with Ricky Gervais, the British comedian.
Yeah.
Obviously he's very well-known
I
atheist.
saw something today. I can't remember what I saw.
Oh, funny.
But my wife is always sending me the little shorts. But
Yeah. Well, he's most notable, obviously, as a comedian, but he definitely does not believe in a God, and is very prominent of his atheism. But he made this film a few years back called The Invention of Lying. And the whole premise of the film is that lying is not like, it's not even an idea in this world, and they only tell the truth. And of course, the jokes are like, you're a super blunt person. Your true self is really coming out. Yeah.
I got you.
But what's really funny is he's so he's the main character, and his mom is on her deathbed in the hospital. And so she tells him, she's like, I'm afraid of death. I don't know what's gonna happen. And she's like genuinely afraid. And so that's when the first lie sparks for him. He realizes that like, if I can convince her of a place, then she will be peaceful. And so, of course, he starts to describe what heaven looks like. He's like, well, you're going to go into this place that's magical, it's beyond, and it's going to be great. And so he starts describing this. And then, of course, stories start picking up on it because it's like, whoa, nobody's ever talked about this. And so the whole premise is that he's the one who created like the 10 Commandments. There's a whole joke of him with pizza boxes, and he has the moral laws and stuff like that. And it's just very interesting because even for him as an atheist, he still doesn't have an actual conclusion on to what's the best scenario for death, or what's the best peaceful way to explain death. And I feel like that really resonates with your message, because clearly our hope is in something certain and then something that is real. If you want to expand a little on that.
It's amazing. These guys, they see themselves as so smart. And I intellectual, kind of like Bill Mayer, super intellectual. There's a few questions I'd like to ask. All right, so let's say that world existed and everybody tells the truth, and then the first lie is to make somebody feel better.
Yeah.
Okay. Couple of questions. Number one, the creativity that you came up with those stories, where did it come from? Where does the idea of sense of beyond come from? Here's the thing, and this is the thing I've tried to explain. I don't think I ever explain it well, but I try to. Atheistic evolution cannot create a moral ethic. Atheistic evolution only has one thing in mind: the discarding of the weak so the strong survive. It doesn't. It's not going to come up. So I don't know if you remember, but I'm pretty sure it was Bill Mayer that came up with the idea. I think the movie was called Ridiculous.
Religiosity or something like that. Yeah.
So the idea that somehow evolution would come up with a moral ethics for its survival. So the idea was, if we are religious, it's because religion is part of the evolutionary cycle to help us survive.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is religion by nature creates people who will die for truth. They're willing to die. That religion is not going to sustain culture in the sense of make sure the strong survive. Because the stronger in that sense would be the intellectual who at least believes in an absolute worldview. And by believing in the absolute worldview, you would automatically assume that they would be the cream of the crop. That worldview would spread, and it would take root, and then other people would believe it. And so the thing I've tried to explain is, when you have people come up with these ideas of a sense of beyond, or of a better place that we go to, you have to ask where if we're just time plus matter plus chance, if we're just material, where does your mind, if it's an evolutionary mind, come up with that idea? Because the evolutionary cycle would come up with some kind of truth that would eliminate the weak. And in this case, the weak would be the religious, because the weak would need, as they tell us, a crutch to make it through life, some kind of hope that's not based on any kind of certainty. So I know that's hard. A lot of that's philosophical mumbo jumbo, but I'm just simply, when you come up with an idea like that, Why doesn't he ask? It's what I call the second question. Okay, so the second question is, what about your mind of atheistic evolution, if there's no God, comes up with an idea of an afterlife, of heaven and goodness? And here's the other thing. What is the need to comfort your mother? Where's the moral ethic come from to comfort and make your mother feel better? Atheistic evolution would not give you any idea of comforting or making anybody feel better. It would just give you the idea that, okay, matter is matter. When you die, that's it. Nothing else is going to happen. It wouldn't create anything in you to make a person feel better. You would have to have some kind of creative, intelligent designer, genius, to put in you the desire to make another person feel better because you feel their life is sacred or their life is special. But if your mother is nothing but a group of chemicals put together, then let her die. And so, I mean, that sounds cruel, but that's if atheistic evolution follows its deepest conclusion, then first of all, there wouldn't be the feeling of trying to make somebody feel peaceful near their death. There wouldn't be, that's called compassion. And love and compassion would not be anything other than chemical reactions, which is exactly what C.S. Lewis talked about when, I think it was the philosopher of his day talked about, when I see a waterfall. And I think, wow, that waterfall is sublime. Now, the waterfall, he says, is not really sublime. If you're an atheist, there's just a chemical reaction that has taken place to make you feel that it's sublime. The waterfall is just a waterfall. So unless you have some kind of creator designer that you're created in his image, where you'd have emotion, where you'd have love, where you would have feelings, where you'd be created in his image, none of these things they're not realities. They're just illusions. So a guy like this, I would love to sit in the room and say, why did you feel the need at that moment to say to make your mother feel better? Why did you feel a need to be compassionate? Why not just tell her the truth? You said, if you think the truth is you're just going to go to nothingness, why not tell her that? Well, that's because there's something in you that wants to be compassionate about somebody you love. And those cannot be products of atheistic evolution. Atheistic evolution does not love, and it does not feel compassion. That's a long journey around to try to explain some of the things I'd like to say to him.
Exactly. And it's also a way to just explain out God, to where somebody with that belief would say, well, this is the reason why I don't need him, is because I can just say these things to make a person feel good. But you would break down all of those questions.
So why do you need to make a person feel good? Where's the compassion come from that you? You just move it back one step further. It's kind of like the argument that, and I think I've mentioned this before. I had a debate once, probably 4 hours. It wasn't aggressive, with an English professor at East Tennessee State University. And his thing was this: why do I need God? I said, well, you don't need, it depends on which God you're talking about. I'm saying that you need a creator. You need a designer. He says, well, why does that have to be God? And I thought, well, God means that God is somebody that is not dependent on anything outside of himself to sustain. So in other words, he is self-sustaining. He is not dependent on anything outside of him. We call that entity God because he's not created and he's eternal. So the only explanation for the universe that we now know is not eternal. By the way, that's making a comeback. So now that we know that the universe is not eternal, it has a beginning, it has an end. Second law of thermodynamics, everything is moving toward death, basically. Now that we know it's not eternal, then we have to have a first cause, which would be God. And he said, well, why do we need to call it God? And then he said, well, why can't we do what Francis Crick said? Why can't we have a spaceship come and drop the spores so that we have humanity? And of course, the next question, well, where did the spaceship come from? You just move it back one more step. And that's what I find frustrating with the atheists. You just keep moving it back one more step, but ultimately you have to have a first cause. In the same way you have to have a first cause for the creating of the universe, you also have to have a first cause for emotion, for love, for desire, for all the things in you. If atheistic evolution is true, then it doesn't have to do anything compassionate. It's nature is red in tooth and claw. So if it creates in us compassion, which is what they're saying, how they would say, well, in order that we could survive. So it needed to create compassion for the survival of the fittest. But the compassionate don't survive.
Right,
the powerful survive.
Correct.
It's the ones who are not compassionate who survive. So those kind of movies, I think. And what happens is people watch them and all of a sudden they think, this is so clever.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably the first lie. That's probably where religion started. Somebody told a lie to make somebody feel better.
Right.
Yeah, but why did they want them to feel better?
Correct. Yeah, and that actually is one of the major arguments, obviously, for like an atheistic movement, is to say, well, the birth of religion is really just a made-up lie to make people feel good.
And they say we don't. They say we don't need God.
Right.
Yeah, you do, or you wouldn't be sitting here.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you do.
Yeah,
or you wouldn't, without God, you wouldn't be able to think and process and having this conversation.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole debate that was on meaning for so long.
Right.
All kinds of conferences. What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose? What is the meaning of man?
Right.
Well, you wouldn't if atheistic evolution would not inspire you to even ask that question. The only reason you ask why is because there's meaning and purpose to the universe.
Right.
But there's no meaning and purpose to the universe without God.
Right.
You always move it one step farther back, and you end up undermining your own mind.
Yeah, correct. And I feel like movements like that, well, if they were true, like you were saying, I feel like the end of humanity would be a lot quicker and a lot more survival of the fittest, right?
No doubt.
So clearly, it's not, well, one, it's not true, but also the need for God is all the more so when you really think about if that's really true, then my gosh, I would really hope that there is a God.
Yeah.
And then we have...
it's amazing how my mind is just turning right now, because I don't know about this movie or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Here's my next question. Is a lie wrong or right? Is it morally wrong to lie?
Yeah. That's a good question.
I mean, so this whole thing is about where the first lie started.
Right,
is lying bad? Or is lying good?
Right.
And it goes all the way back. Well, then you got to have a moral law.
Correct.
To define lying is good or bad. I mean, the whole premise of them, it just suddenly jumped at me. The whole premise is all wrong.
Right. Oh, 100%. I was talking about it with somebody else before here, and I was just saying the whole movie itself is already contradictory, because if we told the truth and only the truth, well, the progress of humanity would not be where we're at today, or in the setting of this movie, which was, modern day, like 10 years ago. Yeah. So it's like, the development of human life would not look like the way this movie presents itself. Yeah. And you saying, like, it really does go back to who is the creator? Why did he create? What was the need for his creation? And those are the bigger questions to answer. And we look at the Bible and we look at history, which is what I really love about your message, is like the historicity of Jesus, the factual evidence that he literally lived here. And there's even outside sources of historical texts like Josephus, and I forget the 4 other historian people.
You got Tacitus, who's a Roman historian, and Josephus, a Jewish historian. But I'm sorry, my mind's still on this lie.
No, I love it.
You remember there was a movie recently called The Good Lie.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
I get asked this question. I mean, again, this stirs a lot, because I get asked this question: is it ever right to lie? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a case of the lesser of two evils. Mm-hmm. So let's say I'm living in the Holocaust and I've got 12 Jews under the floor. Yeah. And the Germans come in and they say, "Do you have Jews in your house?" And knowing that if I say yes, they're going to execute them, I say no. No, I don't. Yeah. It's a lie. I do. But it's the lesser of two evils. Right. Saving a life. If a lie saves a life is good. Right. Now, you might be on a little thinner grass, or thinner, not grass, thinner ice. When my wife says, "Do I look fat in these jeans?" Now you got a problem. Now, that's a problem. Yeah, right. So I don't want any men to be watching this and think, "Oh, the lesser of two evils." Well, the lesser of two evils is you save your life. I don't know if you might ought to cut that, Richard. That may be cut, but it just happened to come to my mind. That's okay. You can even do it live too. Yeah, it's funny. But that lie stuff, it's most of the movies I've seen that try, and most of the debates, I'm sure you've watched some of the Dr. John Lennox and these debates. I'm always amazed at what is assumed behind the question. Right. Like we've talked before about, when you say, how can I believe in God with all the evil in the world? Well, there's an assumption, and the assumption is that there's evil, and there's an assumption that you know the difference between good and evil, but you never ask the second question, which is, why is it that I know the difference between good and evil? Right, yeah.
And I feel like those questions are often avoided either because of, I don't know, what would you say, like afraid of understanding that Jesus is real and the creation is real.
And I've noticed more and more that even Christian debaters won't go there. I'm trying to figure out, I don't know why, because the traditional apologists always went there.
Yeah.
All the way back to Origen, which was probably the first Christian apologist.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a developing thought. The new atheism has already been debunked. People, they're not buying that, so it's gone.
Right.
So now we're trying to figure out what are the questions of the next generation. And maybe you've hit it. Maybe now, instead of just going for the stuff like origin, meaning, morality, destiny, maybe they've decided just to go this route and deflect. And say,
100%.
listen, if we can give a possible explanation for why the things that we usually attribute to God exist, maybe that will show us we don't need God, but you'll never be able to do it.
Right,
it's a logical impossibility.
Yeah, exactly. I was listening to a different podcast with Alistair McGrath.
Yeah.
And he talked about, or he was asked
I met him 2 years ago, did I tell you?
Yes, I know. And I'm
sorry,
little jealous.
Got to sit in a room with him before I went out to speak at the British Library.
Awesome.
And he's sitting there, man. Anyway, I interrupted your story. Go ahead,
No.
Richard, leave that in.
You can talk about him, definitely, that experience. That's awesome. And maybe you can get him over here soon, which would be great.
High probability.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's good to know. But he was on a podcast and he was asked the question of, clearly new atheism is faltering. Not a lot of people are buying into it. We've kind of debunked a lot of their statements and arguments. And so Alice McGrath mentioned Sam Harris, which is, one of the leading, but now he's practicing Eastern like spiritual practices. Alice McGrath is kind of a savage for this. He pretty much calls him out of like he's doing everything to avoid the real truth.
Yeah.
And he understands that what he was arguing for in the past doesn't have any weight anymore.
Nope.
And so now he's like
jumping to
the next thing. Yeah.
I had a lady in New Zealand say, she was a school teacher, and she was invited to Easter service and by a friend of mine. And after the service, she said to me, "I like what you said, but it's just intellectual people don't believe in this stuff." And I said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Do you know how many intellectuals are converted to Christianity because of their intellect?"
Mm-hmm.
And I started going down the list: Blaise Pascal, James Simpson. Even those who didn't convert totally and fully to Christianity, most of the intellects in the past have been at least believed in God.
Yeah.
And then did the homework or did the research on can I follow Jesus? But it's amazing the ignorance in a nice way. It's amazing, as I've said before, if atheists were as uninformed about what Christians believe, or let me start over. If I was as uninformed about the atheist position as they are my position, they'd laugh at me.
Right.
So usually there's just not a complete understanding of what the Christ follower actually believes.
Right.
And that goes back to even the debate on the first 11 chapters of Genesis and the old earth, young earth. Some of those things are hot buttons for them, but they've never encountered anyone who could intellectually kind of communicate to them. This is actually what Christ followers and even the Jews believe for thousands of years about creation. So, but anyway, I don't know how we got off on that. It was a good topic.
I loved it. Yeah, it's great.
But all that does kind of circle back around to the resurrection is not some pie in the sky, not some legend.
Right.
It's rooted in history because primarily, as we talked about before, circumstantial evidence, which alone is not sufficient unless it's overwhelming circumstantial evidence that impacts. And again, circumstantial evidence is the question of if this happened, what would be the result, or what should we expect to see in history? So since none of us were there, if the resurrection happened, what should we expect to see in history? And we not only see those things, we see much more, because you've got this whole movement impacting the Greco-Roman world, and still today, millions and millions come to Christ every year. It is still the fastest. It has more converts than any other religion, and it's still the fastest growing, no matter how many times somebody tells you it's Islam. It's not. Christianity is growing like wildfire in Russia, in China, in South America, and now going right on up through all of Asia. It's still moving and growing because people are looking for truth.
Right.
which goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning again.
Yeah.
You know, does absolute truth exist? So he just keeps moving the question.
Right,
I could go
right.
on. Richard, you might want to cut that part out because I'm just, or you could leave it too. But once you start asking the question of truth, once you start asking any question at all, you're assuming that truth exists.
Right. Exactly.
So if he asks the question, is it right to lie or to tell the truth? He's again assuming there's absolute truth, which you cannot have without a creator God.
Yeah, exactly. And the one thing that you really touched on was that for Jesus to be true, or for the resurrection to be true, the aftermath of what happened. So obviously Christianity is on the rise, and you even see it with the documents of Josephus or different people who are saying the historical figure Jesus lived and was crucified, and for some reason followers began to continue to grow and grow and grow
and give their lives
for the sake of Christ.
And I think, Drew, the most powerful circumstantial evidence for me was that the Jews historically are not going to worship a man as God. Now, you're not talking about just 50 years, 100 years. You're talking about 2,000. You're probably talking more like 6,000 to 8,000 years of tradition.
Yeah.
Now you think about that.
Yeah.
Passed down family for that many years. And there's no way a man would ever be God.
Yeah.
And suddenly, like overnight, thousands and thousands of Jews start worshiping Jesus on the first day of the week, Sunday, because that's the day he rose from the dead.
Yeah.
So overnight, there's what phenomenon? How can you explain? They just throw away hundreds and hundreds of years of the most precious thing to them.
Right.
Tradition and culture. They throw it out and start worshiping Jesus as God, the Son of God. That's the part where I say that no historian's ever been able to give a plausible explanation for that.
Right. Yeah. And how powerful that is, and how true it is, which I think goes back to the idea of hope before Jesus was really a maybe
could happen.
It could, great. If not, it probably won't. Yeah. But then after Jesus, now it's certain.
It's a profound certainty
of what hope really
rooted
is.
in history. Hope, even the definition of hope changed.
Right.
Totally changed. In fact, the Greek word translated hope in the New Testament, hope is a weak English word, but it's the best we got.
Right.
I mean, there's not a better word. We could say profound certainty, but man, it would be hard to memorize that kind of stuff. I mean, hope, as long as we understand what they're communicating, and that's why Paul defines faith, that the Hebrew writer defines faith the way he does in Hebrews 11.
Oh, okay,
The evidence of things not seen. Yeah. Well, that's not hope. That's profound certainty.
Right, exactly. And I actually want to touch up on how you talk about hope is alive and active.
Yeah.
And I feel like for a lot of us, that is either hard to comprehend, whether we're going through really, really difficult situations, or it's just something hard to fathom, either because we're just contemplating with the intellectual side, I guess.
Yeah, I wish I would have had more time to expand on that. Maybe this is the part we keep. But what I've noticed over the course of my life, and in my own life too, as I get older, you get something happens in you. Quite honestly, in my late 40s, when I started having the panic attacks, and I think I shared later that I now look back and know I didn't at the time, but I had an incredible fear of dying. And those panic attacks started. My mom had died at 61, and I still hadn't dealt completely with that.
Yeah.
Then my dad died that year, and then my best friend, really close friend, died all in that short span of time. And then right after the death of my best friend, that's when the attacks started.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out what was going on. Of course, I didn't know they were panic attacks.
Yeah.
But your body's going to respond to whatever internally you're going through, whether you're admitting or not. It's a coping mechanism.
Right.
And so when I came to terms that that's what was going on, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to deal with what is real. And I started asking the questions, okay, what is it that I really believe here? I'd done that with my mom, but I'd kind of forgotten it. And it might have been a coping mechanism then.
Yeah.
But now I'm forced, because now the other thing that happens when you get into your late 40s and 50s, your friends start dying. So people that are your same age die of heart attacks. You're thinking, what? I played basketball with that guy.
Yeah.
You start reading obituaries. What? 58, 45, You start realizing death is real.
Right.
So if you don't deal with that in a personal faith level, you're going to be terrified, which is what we saw when COVID came.
Right. Yeah.
I still see the terror. I mean, young people still wearing masks? Really?
Yeah.
Now, okay, I have a grandmother at home. Okay, fine. But that's not just one or two. There's still the terror, the fear of dying.
Correct. Yeah.
And so until something really supernatural happens in you, it's intellectual and supernatural.
Right.
It's intellectual from the standpoint you got to make up your mind if this is all real.
Right.
And once you do, though, this breathing, this living hope gets into you. And now, here's what that no one's been able to explain to me. Why is it that when I made my peace with death, the anxiety went away, but that's not all. I lost my fear of flying. How do you explain that?
Yeah.
How do you explain that? As soon as that happened in me, the fear, now I put Coldplay on.
Yeah.
I fly on an airplane. I mean, I fly 13, 14, no fear.
Yeah.
Well, what happened? No worrying and afraid that something's going to happen to one of my children or grandchildren. Why? Where did it go? And so there is a living, breathing hope that gets into people that sustains them. Now, I'm not saying they don't mourn and you're sad.
Correct.
And you have concerns. I still pray for my grandkids and my kids. And I still have concerns about things. But it doesn't do what it used to do.
Right.
It's almost like, well, I'm going to die one day. When it happens, it happens. Until then, I'm going to have some fun and live my life. I'm going to do everything, and I'm not going to worry because it doesn't help.
Yeah,
it doesn't help anything.
Right.
So that gave me an incredible freedom. And people who knew me before and after, I just had a guy yesterday said, it was one of the security guys say, you're totally different than where you were before the anxiety.
Yeah.
I said, in what way? He goes, well, you were aloof. So what do you mean? He says, well, you just were kind of like, you didn't trust, it looked like you didn't trust anybody. You wouldn't let anybody really close in, wouldn't really talk to anybody. And I thought, man, he's right.
Yeah.
And part of that is that if you have a fear of losing people, then you won't let anybody get in. You won't let anybody get close or near. Because you don't want to have the hurt and pain. So, I mean, for lack of a better illustration, it's why my wife won't let me have a dog anymore. She says, no, I'll just get close to him. Then he dies and I got to hurt. So if I don't get a dog, it's, but honey, that doesn't make any sense. You can enjoy the dog for 12, 13 years, 15 years.
Right.
But I can't go through that again because Milo, she was really close to Milo.
Yeah, that's right.
I said, okay. So there is an inner peace that I've seen in people that they're like, you can see it just changes. When you lose that fear and you think, man, I'm going to live. I mean, if I die, I'll just be with Jesus. And you really truly believe that. And you're not saying it. It changes. The anxiety goes, the stress, the worry. Now, if I'm tired, it's just old age. Can't do anything about it.
Right.
Did somebody laugh? Richard, did you laugh at that?
I like that because
people on the camera go, "Who's this guy, Richard?"
Yeah, I know they're really good. We're gonna have to put them on.
Have to put him on camera one day.
That's funny. I really love that you said that because I feel like I guess we conclude. Wow, I can't even say the word conclude with this. Is that I feel like a lot of us, even people who claim to be atheistic, it stems from an internal, sorrowful, painful way of living or looking inwardly of saying, what things keep crashing in my life, or life is just not pointed in the direction I want it to be, and the joy that I want to receive is what you would say peripheral, right? It's on the outside, but when you experience the love of Jesus, when you realize what he really did on the cross, was for you to come back, the joy is on the inside, and I forgot how you said it, but the sorrowful way of living is on the peripheral.
Joy becomes central because it's just deep inside you.
Correct.
And it's still you're sad, and still you have moments of sorrow.
Of course, yeah.
But I think too also, Drew, that you hit the nail on the head there because I see, I don't know if you've seen some of the shorts where there will be people talking about abortion or there'll be people talking about hot topic issues.
Yeah.
and you'll see people walk up and they're angry. So they're trying to spark a conversation and dialogue for logic.
Right.
But people will come up and they will scream profanity. They will yell. I'm thinking, wow, what set that,
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you'll have the tendency to want to respond in vitriol.
Of course,
But what you should see is how sad this is, because why are they responding that way?
Correct.
Man, if they're responding that aggressively, there's some deep, deep wound somewhere.
Correct.
Deep. I mean, he goes deep, and they are angry. And for others, it's more of, especially in this generation, nobody's going to tell us what to do.
Correct. Yeah.
So the last thing I want to believe in is God, because if God exists, then I got to conform.
Right.
That's how they see God. So they're going to yell even louder.
Right.
No, there is, so that's been growing for a long time. But even behind that's a real sadness, because they know as well, which is why I think suicide, anxiety, depression is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
Why? Well, when you get rid of God, there's no anchor to your soul, and you know it down deep inside. You can fight for your rights in this issue and this issue, and you can even fight for social justice, which in and of itself is a good thing. But here's what's going to happen: in the end, you're still going to lose yourself.
Right.
And so that goes back. Maybe that's a good place to kind of end. That goes back to, if Jesus rose from the dead in real time and real space, then there's a great purpose to your life. It has meaning.
Yeah.
And love is going to last forever. Community is going to last forever.
Right.
And anything even that you give up in this life will be restored to an infinitely greater degree. Any right that you think you have.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if you follow Jesus, he'll not only change what you do, but he'll actually change what you want to do. Your passions do change. But ultimately, you have that centralized joy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The centralized joy and a living hope.
The living hope is breathing and keeps you going.
Yeah. And what a place to truly be, right? That's like spiritual formation at its best.
At its best, one-on-one and advanced.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, just quickly, after the service today, I met a family, and this family, they lost their son not too long ago, only 18 or 19 years old. And it's amazing how the before and after of them, before they were kind of in Christ, somewhat committed, but now, isn't it amazing? The death of their son has caused them to lean so deeply into God that now he's walking with them, giving that prevailing presence.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And they're growing in their faith.
Right.
I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah.
That cannot happen without the truth of a resurrected Jesus and his spirit coming on the inside to live to transform your thinking.
Yeah.
And it's not just pie in the sky, because that would never work.
Right.
And it's not evolutionary.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Right.
There's got to be a truth that's beyond all of this.
Right.
That when it resides deep in your soul, it changes the way you experience life.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It was a great Easter weekend.
Yeah.
Great service, great testimony, great stories.
Maybe Richard will get saved.
Maybe he will. Yeah, we'll see.
He could. Maybe, who knows?
We'll talk to him
next
after
time.
this.
We'll interview Richard how he got saved on Easter.
Yeah.
Just kidding, Richard. He's already saved.
Oh, that's funny. Well, yeah, great Easter.
Yeah,
awesome.
See you.